appreciate you being here. And Caitlin and I are both very excited about this workshop. This has been one of our highlights for the whole summer of like thinking about this workshop. So just for those of you who don't know us, I'm Sharon Sheehan, math teacher and instructional coach at Glenbrook South, and I'm co-presenting today with Caitlin Reichert, who is a special ed teacher and instructional coach at Glenbrook South. And the instructional coaches at South support teachers in their work at best practices and improving what they want to improve in their classrooms. So today we're really going to focus on that lesson plan structure and how we can combine asynchronous and synchronous learning, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But just a few items of business. Just make sure you keep yourself muted, just to cut down background noise when the dog starts barking and all of that. But do ask us questions. So there will be a couple of places specifically for questions, but anytime if you have one, just unmute yourself and interrupt us, or go ahead and type something in the chat. One of us will be monitoring that. And then again, we'll stick around after for about 10 minutes if you have questions or you want to discuss anything else after the end of the workshop. We are recording the session, and thank you for Caitlin for starting that. That's why I paused, because I was like, I didn't set the record button. At the end of the session, we'll share that attendance link. If you haven't been here, if this is your first one, that is the link that you need to fill out to get paid and get your CP to use at the end of the summer. We are starting to run duplicate sessions. So if you've missed some over the summer, if you're just getting started, just keep checking check our website. They're all up there, but we'll send reminder emails. We have additional sessions. And then there are other sessions from district office. There's an Ed Puzzle sessions next week with a couple of Glenbrook South teachers, and Glenbrook North has some as well. So there is a Google Classroom where you can check all of those out. And always feel free, Glenbrook South teachers, to reach out to us for additional support, and everyone can reach out to instructional technology for support too on the technology aspects of what we're doing. Although today there's not a lot of technology involved. So our goal for today is that you actually leave here with a couple of early lessons designed and outlined and in your mind ready to go. Won't mean all of the details are done, but that your plan is done. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. We're talking about a few early lessons, not necessarily the first couple. And here's how today is going to work. We're going to have a little bit of time for some information and strategies that we'll present to you. Then we're going to break out into groups to brainstorm about where you're going to enter this work. Then there is going to be quite a large chunk of independent time to actually work on those lesson plans. And we'll come back to break out groups to collaborate some more, to get ideas. Once people have started processing, you might be able to push your lesson a little further by incorporating some of the things other people thought of. We'll consider how we're going to get these lessons, especially through e-learning designed. And so we're going to take some considerations for supporting students. There'll be a little more independent work time, and then to finalize and refine what you've done, and then we'll wrap it up. So as we've described in previous presentations, we ground our work in research, and we often ground it in Hattie's research. And he's collected macro data to determine what he calls effect sizes, and what he's determined is 0.4 is indicating 1 year of growth for 1 year worth of learning. Anything greater than 0.4 has a higher impact on student learning. So when it comes to instructional strategies, his research shows that we can do certain things to have a very big impact on student learning if we do them with consistency and fidelity. So for today, when it comes to building your lesson plan, we can look at teacher clarity. And teacher clarity has 6 components. 3 of those 6 components are directly linked to our work today. So the components of teacher clarity, he does mean all of these 6 things in that concept. Clarifying what students are learning, plan your summative assessments according to those targets, sequence your lessons logically, give clear explanations, have students practice, and then take the assessment. And his research shows that if we do those consistently and with fidelity, that has an impact of 0.75 on student learning, which is a high impact. And so in this work today that you're going to do, sequencing your lessons, thinking about how you're going to explain material clearly, and how students are going to practice material, those three things are impacted just in these 2 hours today. So I'm going to transition over to Caitlin, and she's going to talk more about our session today.
Thanks, Sharon. Before we begin, we just kind of want to talk about our priorities for today. We know that we don't have as much information and things are ever changing, so we want to be as prepared as possible with what we have. And we want you to be able to create lessons that can be easily adapted to a variety of situations that may occur. And we know there's a lot of uncertainty around the beginning of the year, and we really want this time to be as useful as possible. And I think we all wish there was more clarity right now, but we just want to carefully remind everyone not to get too caught up in what we don't know, and kind of focus on some of the details that we do know. And what we know is that we can create lesson plans that can be rigorous, engaging, and adaptable using the structure we're going to share today. So even myself, like I've thought to myself, I can't plan my lessons until I know X, Y, Z. I have to have that. But I did start some lesson planning work, and I've realized that so much of what I can make with what information I have now really is easily adaptable. And so sometimes starting that first early lesson is the hardest part, especially when there are unknowns. So we just want to say, let's work with what we have and get some things done so that we can feel accomplished, productive, and have a good start to that early week. So before we really dig into the content today, we want you to meet with about 4 to 5 colleagues that you'll be working continuously throughout the workshop today. And we're just going to put you in those breakout rooms for about 5 minutes. And really just the purpose is for you to meet them, introduce yourselves. You'll be in several breakouts with them throughout the workshop. So during that time, please introduce yourselves and share one activity that you've loved doing this summer so everyone can have a chance to get to know each other. But let everyone know the reason that we did this little introductory meet and greet with your group members is because some of the research that we found this spring and this summer is specifically about the suggestion that teachers should have, students or new groups of people meet in breakout rooms to talk about something non-academic first, something low pressure, before they really dive into content or activities. So we just wanted to model that for you today. This is something you can also do with your students this fall. All right, so Sharon previewed this a little bit for us, but our focus for today is really a bit narrow. It's really just focusing a few days into the school year. So as you noticed when we discussed our goal, we said that we would be working on creating a few early lesson plans and not lesson plans for the first few days. That is a bit different. So we believe, based on some of the research and information that we found, that an e-learning environment, when you have those first days of lessons, they should really be focused mainly on developing a sense of belonging, having students build a strong community for you as the teacher to get to know students, their interests and about them, helping students navigate and practice tech, and then you as the teacher sharing out those clear expectations for your classroom. So, of course, you'll be introducing some content during those first lessons, but it really should be focused mainly on building a strong community. That's really the most important foundation. So we're suggesting for the workshop today, you really start to think about a structure for a few days in, once you can get your content fully up and running, after you've done all of those community building aspects. So for example, for my class personally, I'm going to start with my first early lessons being all about community. And then I'm going to start my full content-based lessons on day 3. And if you're interested in sort of planning out the first days, the coaches are offering a session on building community this coming Monday that's really going to focus on the first days and how to develop that sense of belonging, activities students can do to meet each other, and then ways for teachers and students to get to know each other. And there'll be 2 sessions offered, the Monday, the 27th of next week, and then August 12th as well. So Stanford University suggests that teachers can consider some of these key and anchoring questions prior to developing engaging lesson plans for e-learning. So you can ask yourselves, what do I want students to do before, during, and after class? And then how can a combination of synchronous and asynchronous activities sort of support your plan and your goals? And then finally, ask yourself, how do I plan for the unique groups of students and situations? These are going to be what's guiding us through our workshop today. So I'm going to pass the slides off to Sharon now so that she can share some of the content and strategies behind how you're going to structure your e-learning lessons so that you can get started later on in the workshop.
Thank you, Caitlin.
No problem.
The slides are flashing for me. Are they flashing for everybody else, or just is it my computer or Caitlin's? No, I see Dave saying no. So I think I'm not sure why they're flashing, but that's good. Just as a little add-on to what Caitlin said about what we do and do not know about what's going to be happening in the fall. I'm not sure if everybody caught that Lauren did type in the chat that there have been some decisions made about the structure of e-learning lessons that she said we're fine to share now. So that this could probably help a little bit in your planning today. That in terms of requirements for synchronous sessions, that the first 5 minutes of class will be synchronous and the last 5 minutes of class will be synchronous, and then a minimum of 30 minutes in between. And so so that there'd be about 40 minutes of synchronous sessions in a lesson. And as Lauren is just typing there may be some exceptions to this as well, which we'll get into, but and IS Council is going to discuss it and that kind of thing. And assessment days might be a little different, but that would be a general structure and thinking in terms of time that you can use as you're going through your planning today. So let's just talk a little bit about asynchronous versus synchronous and what could possibly be a good model for you to think about when you're planning an e-learning lesson. The research shows, and Stanford and Northwestern, who've been doing a lot of reading from them, are instructing their instructors to do is to use a flipped model, where you do have these 2 pieces to the lesson, one of which is asynchronous, and students are guided through these online preparation activities, and we do typically think of them as preparation, like preparation for what comes next, which is the synchronous session. And students in synchronous session, you can use that time to engage them in activities that build on that preparation. And so it's an interaction between the 2. And I think you can often think, since there's going to be some flexibility of how you use your synchronous time in that 1.5 hours, that asynchronous could have happened either before, like 2 days before as preparation, homework assignment or whatnot, and then you jump right into synchronous when you start your lesson, or the part of the beginning of your lesson after your first 5 minutes could be asynchronous right away, leading into some synchronous work you're going to do a little bit later in the block. So, and you can interchange those. So you would have a lot of flexibility of how you put the 2 of these together. But I think one of the guiding principles is that asynchronous is preparation for the synchronous. So in this model, your lesson should be comprised of things that are very similar to what you would have in your typical traditional classroom. Some sort of lesson objective or target, your asynchronous activities, your synchronous activities, and I just talked about the different possible ways you could combine those. And then also considering what do students need within those lessons. And we'll talk more about that at the end after you get a basic outline done for yourself of what might work for your classroom. But things like extensions for students, support for students, scaffolding. And Caitlin will talk more about that later. So what is the purpose of asynchronous? I talked about that a little bit, but in that time, most typically we deliver content. That's where that delivery happens. We hold guided online discussions. So using Flipgrid, I know some of you have been to the sessions where that's been highlighted. So discussions can still be happening, they're just happening asynchronously. Activities with automated feedback. giving students work they can do on their own. So in math, maybe they have a few problems to do asynchronously. And then in general, though, they're preparing for their synchronous session. And so what do some of these activities actually look like? So how do we deliver content? The research talks about delivering content more in the asynchronous session than the synchronous. So most typically, if you want to do direct instruction, like if I needed to demonstrate some math problems, it would probably be best to use my asynchronous time for that. So tape myself, modeling a few problems, having the students take notes. Maybe I push out a note sheet for them to take notes on while they're listening to my lecture, of problems. And so that would be best done in asynchronous. If they're watching a video to get content, like in many of our classes, content is delivered and we take some of our course time to watch a video. But most typically, that would be best done in asynchronous. First of all, technology-wise, it works better if you're not pushing out the video over your computer to all their computers. So giving them 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever it is to go watch the video and then come back, or it could be the homework assignment. They're reading text and articles would be asynchronous most often, although, nothing says you can't say, okay, I want you to go read this for 5 minutes, mute yourself, turn off your camera. Like you still could do that synchronously if it made sense to do so. Flipgrid or read out loud, I guess, would be synchronous for that. The Flipgrid discussions, any sort of formative assessment, Google form, quiz mode, Edpuzzle, Pear Deck, practice problems, these could all be done at asynchronously. And we know this is not a complete list. There's probably several things in your mind right now that you use in your class, but just to give you a sense of them, there are some different activities that could be asynchronous. So go ahead. So synchronous. The purpose of synchronous would be that building of relationships, holding discussions about what they read, analyzing the literature, analyzing a problem or solving a problem together. The use of breakout rooms that so many of you have been participating in to do some of this work. Examine the material more deeply in some way that you typically do in your classroom together. And to develop those peer-to-peer collaboration opportunities to get them engaged, involved with you and involved with their peers. So again, not a complete list, but what are some of these things? Your typical think, pair, share, your breakout rooms, using the poll to launch a discussion, using the chat to launch discussions, and get all students participating. The questions you will ask, formative assessments, modeling and demonstration. So again, it wouldn't be that I necessarily wouldn't solve a problem with all of them there, but I wouldn't deliver a whole set of problems most likely, but maybe I would do a science demonstration. Jigsaw, exit slips. So these are some of the activities you could do in your synchronous session. So now I'm going to pass it back over to Caitlin, and she's going to get us ready really to dig into the work. And I can even see on the computer some of you taking notes. Those items, they're going to be on your work handout so that you will have them when you're working. So Caitlin, go ahead.
Thanks, Sharon. So as you might have seen in our email yesterday, not only did we send the Zoom link, but we also sent out our lesson plan organizer and something that you'll be able to use for the remainder of the workshop. So if you haven't done so already, please open that up and make a copy so that you can, type on it or use it as a reference, whatever you prefer. So we're just going to give everyone a minute to kind of pull that up or make that copy. If you do need that link, we can paste it into the chat. Just let us know. So we're just going to take a minute for everyone to get that done. Okay, I think we'll move into our first part of the workshop. So you're going to go back into your small groups and develop some collaboration and lessons, kind of thinking about a few of these ideas here. So you're going to work with your colleague to brainstorm the lesson structure that would work for your class. And then you're going to kind of think about what areas you want to tackle today. So maybe you really want to focus on how you're going to include formative assessment within this type of lesson structure. Or maybe you want to find that really good balance for synchronous and asynchronous, because we might have mentioned it earlier. It's also sort of noted on your handout, but what we found is that in any lesson, whether in person or e-learning, you have to have a good balance of that synchronous and asynchronous. Again, while there will always be exceptions, you may not consider using that whole 90 minutes for synchronous, because there are certain advantages of students doing a balance of asynchronous and synchronous learning. So kind of considering how you can balance out that lesson so it feels good to kids. Also knowing that 90 minutes synchronously can definitely be tiring if they have to do that 4 times a day, right? So kind of considering the best way to balance those lessons, and that's noted in your handout as well. And so for this part, you're really just going to brainstorm with colleagues, and you don't need to be necessarily like typing and working on your lesson plan right at this moment, because after this will be your first independent time to really get a lot of work done. So use that as a guide or type a few things in as you go. We're going to pop you into those breakout groups right now. You should be with the same individuals that you met with earlier. And if you need a Sharon or I, you can click that Ask for Help button when you're in the breakout room. And we have planned about 20 minutes for this. So you'll come back around 9:50. Before we move on to the next kind of phase of our workshop today, we just wanted to pause and see if anybody had questions that they really wanted to get out there before their independent time. So was there anything that you wanted to check in with the whole group about? You can unmute or put it in the chat, whatever works for you.
Go ahead.
I had a quick question, sorry. Do we know, I don't know if Lauren is ready to tell us for how many weeks or months we'll be in this e-learning format, or do we?
I'm not aware of that answer.
Yeah, I don't think it's decided. It's at least a couple of weeks, few weeks, but I don't think there is a determination of exactly how long.
In the small groups we met with, it sounded like they would reevaluate every 2 weeks. So it's not predetermined, but every 2 weeks they'd reevaluate what things are going on.
Yeah, I think that's been changed, the timing of everything. So that'll come out later today, but it's at least enough time where you're going to have lessons like this for a little bit.
Sure.
I have 2 questions from our group. One was, we were talking about doing a technology like scavenger hunt type thing. Yeah. And Maddie said that you had brought that up in your class, Sharon, but we also don't want to hit them from like 6 of their classes with the same, you know, like make a screenshot, make it this. Yeah. So is there word on any distribution of tech knowledge to like freshmen specifically, or like training? So that's my first question. I'll pause for you to answer.
Yeah, yes, I did actually facilitate that session that you're referring to, where Matt and I talked about that tech scavenger hunt, where they can do screenshots or whatever to kind of show that these are the areas that they're going to have to navigate for your specific course. But my answer is less great for the next part. Is I don't know what tech is going to do in terms of, you know, sharing out common information or regarding technology for freshmen, especially. I know that they'll have something, but we don't know exactly what that will be. So it is going to be a little hard. They might be doing some repeat activities in terms of the navigating tech piece.
Okay. And then my second question is, as far as like the layout of time, because we never had, I had never heard the 5 minutes and then 30 minutes and 5 minutes before. So is it going to be, is the 30 minutes maximum for synchronous? And then also, should all of our instruction fit within those 90 minutes? Is there homework? Like, where does all that fit?
Well, I know I can say that the 30 minutes is minimum. So the 5 minutes and the five at the beginning and the 5 at the end are a guarantee. And then there's that minimum of 30 at
Okay.
another point. So that is clear. You can go above it, or you can add it to that start of your day if you wanted.
Great.
And there is homework.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it'll run much more like a traditional class schedule.
Got
So
it.
you can
Okay.
think about, and I think to Caitlin's point of the minimum of a 30, so with the 5 and the 5, that's a minimum of 40. Think about when you're designing your balance, because we probably don't want kids in 90 minutes of synchronous 4 times a day, right? So,
Right.
but so what would be asynchronous, and then how would you use your homework time? Would you use that for that asynchronous, like the flipped classroom model, where that's where your lesson is
Got it.
that you used to do in the classroom? So
Thank you. Very helpful.
That's a great point, Sharon, to really think about homework being that asynchronous preparatory activity that can lead into the next day or the next block synchronous extensions and all the things that they'll be engaging in with you. Any other questions that we want to kind of get out, or we're ready to work on our own?
Sorry, can we get any information about like how we will be facilitating, or if we were talking in our group about basically like just concerns about screen time. So 90 minutes between sync and async, and then possibly homework. Oh my gosh. Will there be a way to facilitate like packet pickups at school if we need to print materials for them? Or I'm anticipating wanting to reach out to my students and find out, do you have a printer at home? But I know that kids don't check their email during the summer. So is there any way we can work with the district to get like a survey going out, so we find out what tools do you have available so we can make your life less on a screen?
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that yet?
Well, what I do know is in the spring, there was an option to send items to the print shop through, our Xerox email. And the kids were able to pick it up if they needed paper copies. Or of course they can print at home if that's available to them. But I do know, just through the special ed department, we've kind of just been talking with RIS about that material piece and getting student information about what students need, certain items, so that they have some of that hands-on stuff. So I'd maybe suggest reaching out to your IS to see what kind of materials, like physically, that you could get and how that could be distributed in an equitable way.
Thank you.
Caitlin, there's one other question in the chat about optional synchronous time. I do not believe the optional synchronous time would count towards the 30 minutes, because as Caitlin emphasized a minute ago, there's a minimum of the 5 minutes beginning, 5 minutes of end, minimum of 30 minutes synchronous time. So it can't be optional. Although there's some flexibility, as I don't know if people saw a question earlier on, that you could have 30 minutes and have different groups. So like maybe you divide up, you have 15 minutes with 1/3 of the class, 15 minutes with another third of the class, 15 minutes with another third of the class, and then 15 minutes with the whole group. That would get you your 30 minutes. Each kid needs 30 minutes of contact time with their teacher. That's I think what they're really thinking about.
Perfect clarification. So I think we're going to head on into our next aspect, which is your first independent time. So now that you've had time to kind of sit back and brainstorm with colleagues and kind of talk through what we've learned today, I know it's kind of exciting to learn a little bit more about the schedule we did not know, in advance. We're just going to really have you develop those lesson plans for the few days into the year, really focusing not on the first day or second, but a little bit after that. So the goal is to build as many lessons or aspects as you're able to. And so in order to keep our breakout groups the same for the rest of our workshop, we're going to keep you all kind of in this main room of Zoom. So we ask that everyone mute themselves and turn off their video so that there aren't any distractions. And we also know that many of you are here with a co-teacher or a course team, and you might want to collaborate during independent time. So feel free to open up your own Google Meet to coordinate with each other and kind of co-plan. Or you could even just do, if you have your cell phones, you could do a quick phone conference between you guys so that you can get some of that work done as a team during our independent time as well. So we just want to make sure that everyone is going to hide their video and mute now so that we can have a distraction-free environment. And if you do need support from Sharon or I, we're here to clarify. We really want you to do the brainstorming on your own, but you can use the chat. So when you go into the chat, you're able to send that private message to the GBS coaches. That's the one that you can click, and we'll be able to monitor that. Hi, everybody. It is 10:25. So if you wouldn't mind showing your video just to kind of let us know that you're back. We're going to discuss one slide, and then you'll be going into another breakout. So feel free to stay muted, and we're just going to talk briefly about we have two more considerations to kind of think about as you work on your plans today. So as you continue working for the rest of the workshop, we really want you to consider how you're going to display or share out your daily lesson plans with students in the remote setting. We know that students benefit from a clear structure for viewing their tasks that they have to accomplish each block. And we also know that the district has sort of chosen Google Classroom as that home for kids to look and obtain their daily lesson plans and activities. So when you're making those lesson plans, think about how you're going to share them out with kids, and try to do your best to stick with one format and use that consistently. So you can use some different options to share that out. Google Slides is a great way to kind of post an agenda slide with the daily tasks, the date, and the 4 things that everyone has to accomplish, sort of labeling what's synchronous and what's asynchronous. You could also do a very similar thing in a running Google Doc where you add a new day at the top every time that also says what kids will be doing asynchronously and synchronously for that one block. You could also do a video of you explaining the tasks for that day, so you're kind of checking in with them in that sense. And now, based on Lauren's information, we also found out about that mandatory first 5 minutes of synchronous check-in. That would be a great time to really, especially at the start of the school year, review the lesson plan for the day. So kids can hear you, see you, and you just talk through whatever the tasks are so they know where they're completing them and how and at what time. And finally, you could use a mix of the above, but we just urge you to really consider how to do that in a consistent manner. And if you do have any other ideas for good, clear ways to share out lesson plans, feel free to chat about that in your next breakout group or post some of your thoughts in our group chat as well. So that leads us to our next breakout group. So this is going to be your last time to work with those colleagues. And really, your time is just going to be spent doing a variety of things based on what you would like to discuss individually and then supporting each other. So you can share out the lessons that you created during this independent time. You can talk about aspects of a lesson or a particular moment that you really need to kind of think through with someone else. And you can also just talk about what I shared on the last slide, how you plan to give kids the tasks that they need to do in the block. So remember that when you do go to breakout rooms, you can use that share screen button. So if you want to kind of like show everyone what you've been typing, whether it's on a handout or something else, that might be nice for the visual, or feel free just to talk it through. And again, if you need Sharon or I, you can click the Ask for Help button when you get back into that breakout. After this, you're going to have some more independent time to address all the things that you collaborated on. So right now, we're going to work on this for about 20 minutes. So we're going to come back around 10:45, maybe just around there. So Sharon's going to put you into those breakout groups right now. Okay, thanks, Sharon. So this is our last slide that you're going to consider for the workshop today. It's really about just thinking how you can best support all students within the lesson plans. So whenever you create a lesson, we know it's.
Oh, well, that didn't work. Sorry, Caitlin, I muted all, therefore I muted you.
No worries, that's okay. I wasn't saying anything that good. Okay, not sure what people heard, but essentially we just want you to consider how to support all students, and we do this in and out of e-learning. So you might have to plan differently, knowing that you have different groups of students coming into the school year. You may have students who require more support or less. So for example, here are some things that you can consider. Are there scaffolds in place for students who may require more support? And if not, how can you build those in? So for example, I know Sharon mentioned, for example, the asynchronous opportunity could be students doing independent work. But if you have a class that really struggles with independent work because maybe they have some more unique needs, they have IEPs or 504s, you might not be able to give the amount of independent work that a different teacher would. So how can you balance that? Where can the scaffolds be in place? Or are there extension opportunities for students who need a challenge and more of a rigorous opportunity embedded in that lesson? And always consider if the lesson and the materials that you're providing are accessible for all students. And if they're not, how can you adapt? And then finally, consider if you work with an instructional assistant, how can they support you and the students in that e-learning environment as well? So you can write little notes, as you might have already seen this. These bullet points are listed on your handout. And so we are going to get into our last part of the workshop, which is back to independent time. So you can do a variety of things with your time. It's going to be for about 15 minutes. You can either work to develop a brand new lesson, you can refine or edit any of the lessons that you might have discussed with colleagues in your last breakout, or you can think about those considerations that I sort of talked about in this last slide as well. So again, we're going to stay in this main room, so we would ask that everyone please mute and turn off their video so we have a distraction-free environment. And again, if you need to ask Sharon or I a question, please use the chat. We're happy to answer anything through that chat. So once again, we're going to mute ourselves as well, and we'll be getting back right before 11. So Sharon and I just want to thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate your time, and we hope that you had some great collaboration. You were able to be productive and kind of get a handle on where you might start these lessons for our e-learning environment. So we just wanted to share that if you wanted to think through any of these lesson plan structures or different aspects of your lesson, the GBS coaches are here to support you. Just feel free to reach out to any one of us. And if you'd like more support related to technology or district questions, feel free to reach out to Ryan Breetag, Lisa Sly, and Stephanie Manley. They're resources for you as well. As I mentioned earlier, the coach's next session is on Monday, July 27th, on building community in the classroom. And as you can see, Sharon just posted the Google Doc link so you can fill out your attendance and get your feedback in for how our workshop went today.